morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you happen to be in the world. This is Kiara Ashanti. Welcome to the Business Intercept. This is a YouTube channel where we talk about business, try to find interesting business news that you might not see on CNN, Fox, or in the Wall Street Journal, different items. Also, what I try to do, and I've done this in the past with some of the videos I've done already, is talk about certain things that might be popular news, political news, when it has an impact on the economy or in business in some form or fashion, kind of go over exactly how that works. It's been a little while since I've been able to put together a video for you. Primary reason is I was actually traveling across the country by bike. Yes, pedal power. Wanted to see, or at least attempt to try to go from Washington, D.C. all the way out to Washington State. And as a consequence of preparing for that, getting ready to do that and going out, I haven't been able to put together any videos. Now, this might sound crazy to you, but there's an actual whole subculture of people who travel the country and travel other countries on a regular basis purely by pedal power. They call it bike touring or bike packing. Which term you use really is determined by the type of terrain that you're riding through. If you'd like to get some more information about that trip, I did put together a newsletter called Wheels to Adventure, where I chronicle everything that was going on during the trip, the sights, sounds, people that I met. You can find that at www.wheelstoadventure.com if you're into cycling, bicycling, bike touring, or just general tourism and adventure. Okay, so going forward, I am going to be having more videos come out. I'm trying some new software. I'm trying some software right now, for instance. So please, in the comments, if there's anything that doesn't quite sound right, look right, let me know. As I'm trying to tweak exactly which software to use and the setup in general. Okay, and one of the things I'm going to be doing as we go forward is I'm going to put together a new segment. And this segment will be called In Focus. And In Focus will be specifically, I'm going to take industries or companies and focus in and give you some information about them. I got this idea while I was traveling because I kept running across certain companies, certain types of business services or travel services specific to bike packing and camping and things like that. And I thought it would be interesting if people knew more information about those companies and decided to expand it out. Well, I will be doing this for a lot of different companies, camping companies, biking companies. One of the companies that we're going to talk about in this video as well is going to have an upcoming episode of In Focus on that. What that means, of course, is, and you know the drill here, if you want to be sure that you get any of those In Focus videos or any of the videos that are done here at the Business Intercept, then please subscribe, hit the like button and the notification bell. If you've been watching YouTube videos for at least the last 2 years, you know the drill. We all have to ask you to do this because it's the only way to really beat the algorithm that YouTube has put together. The algorithm is supposed to be unbiased. It's supposed to be just on what's popular and what has a lot of engagement. But YouTube does tweak it. And whenever they have a video that they don't want you to see as much, it might not show up in your video recommendations unless you happen to be subscribed to the channel and you're set up to get notifications when new information content comes out. So please, again, go ahead and subscribe, hit the like button, get the notifications, and of course, always, if you got questions, comments, critiques, whatever it may be, put them down in the comments below. Okay, let's get into the pain. And yes, this is going to be painful. It's going to be painful for a lot of reasons. We're going to touch on what the social and political move is, and then I'm going to expand out and talk about what are the business impacts to the companies involved, to the industry as a whole, and kind of give you a backdrop as to what's going on and why it matters, okay? So, as you have seen in the thumbnail and as was released, let me go ahead and pull this up. I've got some real specific notes here that I'm going to be going over with you today. So sometimes you might see me glance over. I would just want to make sure that I stay on track and get you all of the information that I can. And then, of course, when I can, make sure that the screen is going to look the way that it should. Okay, so here we go. It was announced on Thursday that a character in the comic book Batman, Robin, is now going to be, they say queer here on CNN.com. I say gay. More specifically, they are calling him bisexual. Let me just go kind of give you the brief overview. The latest issue of a Batman comic series confirms the Cape Crusader's lovable sidekick, Robin, is queer. Tim Drake, one of several characters who have taken up Robin's mantle in the comics, accepts a date with a male friend in the new issue of Batman Urban Legends, a series that debuted earlier this year. The issue's final page sees Drake visit his friend Bernard at his home after the two shared a moment of unexpected connection. In the last panel, Drake tells Bernard, "Hey, beaming, I think I want that," after Bernard asks him out. They say this happened because this is who Tim is. Writer Megan Fitzmartin said in an interview with Polygon, "I love this character very much, and as I went back to reread as much as I could do Robin justice, it became clear this is the story Tim needed to tell." This is normally a PC type of channel, but what that writer just said is bullshit. That's a weirdo that doesn't know anything about comic books at all. Nothing about the character at all, and I will prove that to you in just a few moments here. And what she just did and that comment that she made is kind of emblematic of what's going on in the culture. Okay, the comic book. How can I put this? All right, first let me do this. I'm going to give you sort of the elevator pitch as to who Tim Drake is, and that way you'll have a better idea of what's going on. And I explain to you after that why all of this matters, okay? Because believe it or not, it does. Okay, so as was mentioned in the piece there, the sidekick partner of Batman has had several characters of different names fulfilling the role. One of the best storylines in the comic universe and in comics in general was something called The Killing Joke, okay, and Death in the Family. And this is when the second character to play the Robin role, Jason Todd, goes after the Joker on his own, gets beaten to a pulp with a crowbar, and dies. It was a shocking death because of the way it was depicted. I don't think it was really anticipated. You know, you kind of go back. I mean, it's been a while, but you go back in time. When there was going to be, quote, a death for Superman, it was highly publicized, highly hyped. And so a lot of people bought the series, but you weren't surprised when it happened because you had known for weeks that they were going to kill off Superman. This was different. This was one of the first, like, deaths done in this way in the comic industry. And so it was a shock, again, not only that it happened, but also in its depiction. Okay? Now, about a year later, they decided they wanted to bring the character back. And now what I'm going to do is, let me just switch the thing here. I'm going to pause away from the script and kind of add some information here, because what you have to understand, and this is going to matter as we talk about the business implications of this later on. There are two parts to the comic book industry, and it's the same thing with video games, with movies, and with television. There's two parts to it. there's the creative side, and then there's the business side. The creative side is generally handled by writers, comic books, writers, pencilers, editors. In the movies, it would be screenwriters, the directors, and to a certain extent, the cinematographer, because they set up the look, as well as the editors, they set up the pacing of the movie. The business side, of course, is handled by the suits, the people who generally don't know anything about creating a product. They don't know how to make movies typically. They finance the movies, they help market the movies, but they aren't the filmmakers. In comics, they're not the comic writers, they're the suits. People who are looking at the bottom line, the expenses, and trying to think of sometimes legitimate and sometimes illogical ways to try and expand sales for the comic. In this particular case, or if we're talking about movies, the movies. When Batman was originally conceived, there was no Robin, but the suits that deemed it appropriate to try and find a way to get a younger generation, younger readers into the comic book, and one of their answers was a sidekick for Batman that was kind of cutesy, young, so your 8, 9, and 10-year-old would also buy the comic book. That was purely a business decision, not a creative decision. Now, the creative people, I'm not sure whether they grumbled about it or whatever, but what they did is they added it, and at first he was a lot of fun and made him real colorful, so he would stand out on the covers as opposed to Batman's, dark and brooding type look. And they decided to make the character have a real purpose as opposed to just being in there to get sales for little kids. They gave him decent backstories as the years grew on. They gave him a tragic background. They gave him depth. They made the character turn from a marketing ploy into a real character. Now, it was easy to do that because, of course, you were starting with a blank canvas, okay? And within the, mythos of the comics and Batman specifically, Robin became a necessary partner for Batman, not just a sidekick, because his colorful uniform and antics had the bad guys focus in on him, and then Batman would come out of the shadows and just straight wreck everybody. And also he added some balance to a character that could be seen as a little bit too dark and brooding. Now, over the years, that has gone back and forth. They've made Batman more brooding because people like that part of the character more, and the sidekick character wasn't as necessary to keep him balanced because they weren't really trying to show him balanced. In any case, he became so synonymous with the character and with Batman over the years, both in storytelling but also in sales toward the public, that in a way Batman does not function as a character and as a property, IP, as well by himself as he does with Robin. Even in the titles of which it's Batman focused and Robin isn't always in the story, because he's around in the reader's mind, it works. So they decided to bring back the character of Robin, but instead of just bringing Jason Todd back to life, something that they would do later on, they decided that they would go ahead and create a new character, okay? That character was Tim Drake. He was introduced in 1989 and officially became the new Robin in 1990. This iteration of Robin was a hit. I don't know if it was because people were starving for a new Robin. I doubt it. I think it had a lot more to do with his costume right here that you see. It's much better looking than this one over here. Okay. Also, the way they conceived Tim Drake was more along the lines of a younger Batman from the detective side. So, the original, Dick Grayson, he was acrobatic. He's supposed to be fun. Again, his beginning character was really designed as a way to get kids into it. And so that was really the foundational underpinning of his character. Jason Todd was supposed to be a little bit angrier, more streetwise, which obviously leads more into him being more like Batman because of the anger and mental issues. But that character wasn't nearly as popular, I think, because of that. I mean, you've got two angry people there, so it just didn't work. Tim Drake was different. He was an actual detective. He figured out that Batman was Bruce Wayne all on his own. I think a lot of that contributed to him becoming one of the more, becoming popular so fast. Okay, so that's the background. Why does this matter, right? Because this is nothing more than a comic book. It's just pure fantasy. It's made up stories. These characters aren't real. Why are so many people, most people saying white males in their parents' basement, getting so pissed off about this? Well, let me explain why this does in fact matter, okay? You see, comics are like movies. The underlying economics of the business is dependent on demand. Demand created by the love of readers for the characters and the stories in the comics. Good characters and stories lead to success, which leads to money for DC Comics or any other publisher. Let me give you an example. Back in the late 70s, the X-Men were conceived really, I think, in the late 60s. But through the 60s into the late 70s, the X-Men was really a third-tier property. Marvel didn't really know what to do with those characters and their backstory and how they got their powers once the people who had created had left the company for a little while. This was until Chris Claremont took over the X-Men title and then spent the next 17 years providing some of the most well-known storylines in comic book history and developing characters, old and new, into versions that people loved. And the X-Men exploded in sales as a result. Correlation. Good character, good stories, creates demand, which creates sales. That is the process in comic books, movies, and television. It's not a process that can be short-circuited. It's not a process that can be manufactured by paying attention to demographics or Twitter people. But we'll get more to that in a little bit here. The primary issue is, though, there's a flip side to that coin. And that flip side is rather simple. If you mess with the characters, in ways that do not make sense for the character itself, for their storyline, for the way that the character's been set up as their core personality and character, you hurt sales because people turn away. Let me give you an example. Batman is probably, in terms of the core characters in the DC universe, is always depicted as the coldest, the most violent in a certain way, although, there's probably something that could be said about Wonder Woman considering she is an Amazon and that's how they train to be, warriors. But in any case, he does not kill. He may beat the hell out of people, but he does not end their life. So, if you open up a comic book, primary comic, not a multiverse story, not an Elseworlds story, not an alternate reality story within the DC Comics universe, in any of the prime time Batman comic books, if you open it up as a fan of Batman and he starts acting like the Punisher, you're going to say, what the fuck? What the hell's going on? This isn't Batman. You'll complain about it. And if Marvel doesn't, if DC didn't change it, you just stop buying the comic book, because what you're reading is no longer the character. Okay? There is a push in the entertainment business at all levels to get woke, to get with social justice, to inculcate in the story's characters a certain viewpoint of the world, politically and socially. Okay? Progressive ideas and social ideas are infecting the industry, and it's poisoning these IPs. Now, I've done some screenwriting, written some plays, and when I was in college, first learning how to screenwrite, there's an old adage that our professors used to say all the time, to the point that as soon as they started to say it, we could finish the sentence for them. And that was, if you want to send a message, go to the post office. And what that means is stories need to be stories, not soapboxes for any personal viewpoints, left or right. When you start to focus in on, I have a message I want to send, I have a message I want to highlight, that becomes your focus, and it takes away focus on the character or storyline. In addition, when you do that, there's no way to do it without sounding preachy from your point of view. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that themes and or certain messages can't be somewhere woven in to whatever creative property that someone's creating. That's always the knock when people hear people like myself saying this about not putting messages into their work. They're like, look, there's always been underlying themes and messages in comic books, film, and television. And that's true. However, there's a difference between having a theme that's a third or fourth consideration below the considerations of story, plot, and character, and making that the most important thing. When you make that the focus, you turn people off because the focus isn't on what they came to see or read. You're not focused on the character, and you're essentially scolding or preaching to them. And people don't want to hear that. Especially in the world today where we are all hyper-focused or hypersensitive to political and social messages. We can see them a mile away, okay? When the message of a writer or a company wants to send is priority one, that becomes the focus instead of story. Here's the bottom line. And it's happened in this situation with Tim Drake. Understand something. This iteration of Robin is 30 years old. Not the character, the history of the character. He's been around for 3 decades. His character and who he is already established. When this writer says this is who Tim always was, really? Because I remember him dating a character that's a female in the comics. Stephanie Brown is the name of the character. At no point in this 30-year history was there ever a male character that this character interacted with where anybody could have thought he was bisexual or gay. In fact, pretty much the only other male characters he would tend to interact with on a regular basis were other superheroes, Titans, Justice League members, people like that. There's no history of this character being gay or bisexual or anything like that. It's not who the character is. It's not who the character ever was. So they've falsely made a statement that a lot of people reading this on CNN.com will take as gospel, because these are people who don't read comic books. If you don't read comic books and you just go to the internet, then you don't know the 30-year history of this character. And he's not the only one. Okay? Look, I'm going to say it again. Tim Drake, as an incarnation of Robin, is a 30-year-old character. It's established. The character's not gay, he's not bisexual, he's a straight white male. A normal dude who's a superhero. But out of the blue, they're making him bisexual in the comics and black on HBO show Titans. Inclusion will be the excuse here. Homophobia will be the charge of me and anybody else who says that it pisses us off. And at the end of the day, making those accusations only pisses off your core audience even more, okay? And it doesn't make sense. This is when we get into this other saying that's become popular in the last 3 to 4 years: get woke, go broke. If you've never heard it before, basically it simply means that the more you focus on the woke style of politics or social justice, you ultimately hurt your brand. You just do. You don't increase sales. You don't increase love for your brand, because you're becoming political. Nearly every company in the industry has gone that direction, has lost money, or gotten completely embarrassed in the public sphere. Now, in entertainment, this is rampant, and it extends way beyond Robin. And this is why I keep going by this. It's easy to say it's just one character, he's not real, why does this matter? Well, again, it matters from a business point of view, because comic book buyers come to the books and spend their hard-earned money because they like the character. They're invested emotionally in the character. Doesn't really matter whether you think that's weird or not, because this industry, comic books only, is a $1.5 billion annual in sales industry. That's a lot of money. When you decide to start bleeding in the other aspects that comic books leads to, movies, television shows, toys, video games, we're talking tens of billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars, all predicated on love of the character itself. If someone doesn't like the character, they're not going to go see a movie about it, and they're not going to buy a comic book about it. And if you take a character that people love and change it, people don't buy it. A couple years ago, some dumbass weirdo decided to make Captain America a secret Nazi. Did that book sell? No, it did not. No sales. It was a complete and utter failure. Now, it was easily predictable that was going to happen. And there was no reason to do it other than a certain disdain for the character itself and the patriotic values that Steve Rogers is supposed to embody. Okay? The other problem from a business point of view and why this matters is Warner Brothers Media, which owns DC Comics, has a problem with synergy. Nothing in their properties that are comic book based match. Look at Marvel. One of the geniuses of Marvel is that all of their movies are integrated, right? You look at one movie and then there's clues about what's going to happen in the next movie. The characters in the movie and some of the television shows, not all of them, but some of the television shows, refer back to events that are happening elsewhere in the movie universe. That's why I call it the MCU, the Marvel Comics universe, right? Because it's all connected. Well, people outside the industry think that was a genius move by Kevin Feige. Except it's not. That's what comics have been doing for decades. That's how comic books work. Thor talks about the Avengers. The Avengers talk about Thor. Thor is in the Avengers, or the Avengers show up with the X-Men. Thor shows up someplace in the X-Men. Sure, Thor shows up in the Iron Man comic book. They're all integrated. Now that makes it hard to, keep track of this mess, which is why Marvel and DC alike are always having these quote-unquote continuity changes, because sometimes these storylines don't make any sense, and they have to find a way to try to weave it back or cut it back to make it somehow manageable. Something that they'll probably be trying to do with this bisexual thing at some point as well. Okay? Point is, because of that, you buy one magazine, one comic book, you might be introduced into another. This is where crossovers came from. Okay? A marketing ploy, again, from up high to try and get more sales. So let's go back to the X-Men example. The X-Men, when Chris Claremont took over after 2 or 3 years, was the best-selling comic book group across all companies, Marvel and DC. Outsold everybody. Because of that, that's the reason why you got the New Mutants. That's the reason why you got the X Factor and X-Force and a Wolverine miniseries and a Storm miniseries and a Gambit miniseries, because the suits decided that they needed to exploit, and I use the word exploit specifically, as much of the interest in mutants and X-Men as possible, purely for the bottom line. So they made these these writers and editors create characters that probably ordinarily would not have ever been created. Now, once the push was made, they allowed the writers to figure it out, which is why a lot of it was able to be integrated in a much better way than future attempts of things that the corporate side of the business did. But the point here is that was all done to increase sales, because people thought if there's an X-Men and Avengers crossover, then you'll buy the Avengers titles that have the X-Men in it, and maybe because of the artwork or the characters or whatever, you'll decide to buy some further Avengers comic books once the crossover is done. Synergy. DC doesn't do that in their movies. Example. In the HBO Max series Titans, based on the Teen Titans, once again, Tim Drake is going to show up in that series for season 3, which is out now. In the television show, it's the wrong one, this young man right here is playing Tim Drake. He's obviously black. Maybe, but we'll get to that in a second. Okay? So they've made him black on the television show. In the comic books, he's white and now gay. Now, this just happened, so there's probably not going to be any allusion to that in the television show, but there might be some of that in season 4 if he's in it as well. But imagine this. You have a young boy, 10 years old, 9 years old, who wants to buy a comic, likes Robin, and now Robin is talking about dating and kissing or whatever they're going to show boys. And now you have to explain that to your 8, 9, and 10-year-old when you don't want to have that conversation yet. And then he goes to look at Titans, which are probably not appropriate for a kid that age, but nonetheless, you know how kids are, they kind of sneak in things. And he's going to look at it and be like, well, he's black. What's up with that? That's weird. And it doesn't stop there either. Okay? In the movies, HBO is going to do a movie on Batgirl. So he's black, and Batgirl is going to be black as well. Now, again, what's the big deal, right? Well, laziness. See, here's the belief. There's an idea that these companies are saying, look, on the business side, what we have to do is appeal to as many or as much of the different demographics as possible. So white, female, persons of color, young, old, whatever the case. We need to put everything, as many different demographic pieces into our movie as possible to get that demographic interested in the television show or character. Because, representation. That's insulting to every black person. The idea that unless you make a white character black, we won't come see the show is kind of stupid. I mean, Robin's been around for, the Tim Drake Robin's been around for 3 decades. The actual Robin character has been around nearly as long as Batman himself. Plenty of black people were buying the comic book anyway. They haven't stopped reading it because Tim Drake is not black. And as I will say later on in this video, and I'll say it now, nobody was asking for this. There is not a single gay person that sent an email to Warner Brothers Media saying, please make Tim Drake gay. Now, they may have said, we would like to see some more characters that are gay. They may have gotten emails saying, we would like to see more characters or a greater emphasis on black characters in the movies, television, or comics. But that's not the same as saying we want you to turn one of these characters black or female or gay. No, that's not the same thing. When I say I want to see more black characters, I want you to make a TV show or movie about, Jon Stewart. Get rid of the ridiculous CW Black Lightning and put him in the comic. Put him in a movie. Put Vixen into a movie. Or create a brand new character. Look, Batwoman was an addition to the Batman family. It's got to be more than 15 years now ago, I believe. Was there really a need for an additional Batman-based character in the comic books? No, there wasn't. But the writers and or corporate America, corporate offices rather of DC, made a decision that they wanted to do a, quote, light pander to the gay community and created Batwoman. But they went through the trouble of creating an original character with an original backstory. And the first 2 to 3 years, the comic book was actually pretty good, because while the character was in fact a lesbian, that was not the emphasis of the stories. The emphasis of the stories were her deciding to put a Batman-based cowl on to fight crime, even though she was a cop, and all of the strife between doing that and, of course, doing it with the disapproval of Batman himself. That's what that all was about. And that was enough. You didn't need to do what the CW television show does, which is an overemphasis on the private life and therefore the gay lifestyle of the main character. Now, that's true. On the one hand, CW is known for all kinds of emotional drama, even with their heterosexual heroes, which most people find unnecessary. So there is that. At least they're staying within brand from that point of view. But the point I'm making here is, if you want to see, if you are getting pushback from any particular, quote, marginalized community, the respectful way to handle that is to elevate characters that are already in that demographic, black, female, gay, whatever. Or if you don't have enough of a roster in that demographic, you create a new character. Hey, look, that's what writers and creators are supposed to do, particularly in Hollywood. I mean, you're supposed to be the most creative industry on the planet, it would seem to me that being able to create a new superhero with a new take on certain old types of powers, or, God forbid, figuring it out and coming up with a brand new power set that comic book readers have not seen before, would be relatively easily to do. It would take a little work, but it would not be lazy, which is what this is. Okay? So let me give you a couple of other examples of this. Okay? Let me just take a look at my notes here. Yeah. To show you just how ridiculous this has gotten, think about this. Warner Brothers is seriously considering, as I'm sure you probably have heard, making Superman, Clark Kent, black, and getting this guy right here, Ta-Nehisi Coates, to write the story. Question: how many people do you think were sending emails to Warner Brothers Media asking for Clark Kent to be turned into a black person? Superman is supposed to be a hopeful character, one that makes people aspire to be better than themselves. How's that going to work with this guy right here who never met a white person that he didn't hate? I mean, seriously. Look, nobody wants to see a black Superman. Nobody important anyway. And who are the important people? Your core audience. That's who's important. Another example of this craziness is a new graphic novel coming out called I Am Not Starfire. Okay? It's coming out as a graphic novel, and it's a story about Starfire's daughter. This is Starfire, and this is her daughter. As you can see, they don't look anything alike. Okay? When the trailer for this came out, it got crushed. It got crushed. Ratioed, loads of YouTube videos making fun of it, loads of Twitter posts making fun of it. And the reason for that is pretty simple. Just look at her. It's clear that they wanted to make an attempt at making her fat and ugly, as opposite from her sexy, hot, sexualized mother as they can, because they wanted to make some sort of statement about that. Further, as you can see from the artwork, it's just awful. I mean, this looks like it was colored with crayons. Seriously. And a story in which the teen is basically super angsty, no one wants to read that in a comic book. I mean, that is good in a literary, young adult, female-centric novel, but not in comic books. Let me give you an example that is connected to Starfire. So, Raven, who is half a demon, is very dark, is very angsty, not only in the comics, but that's brought to a whole different level in the animated cartoons and movies that they've done of the character. So people who are fans of the Teen Titans know this character and know that about her. And that shows up in some of the interactions she has, in some of the storylines that are based on trying to defeat her father, but it's more of a backdrop in terms of how the character is written. It's not the primary focus of the stories. Because if every issue was that, it would be boring and nobody would buy it. This is trying to send a message. Nobody wants to hear these messages. And when you read even just the trailer, it becomes clear that this woman right here, who is the writer and creator of this, is not a comic book person. She's a writer that's gotten some fame, I guess, from either novels or commentary in terms of journalism. They hired her, but she's not a fan of comic books. She's not a fangirl. She's just not. Okay? So, what does all of this do? Whether it's Tim Drake, now Black Superman, making taking the feminine nature of a lot of the characters out of the drawings. What is that having an effect on? And what it's doing is driving down sales. Again, 2019, the comic book industry did 1.7 billion in sales. It then in 2020, like so many other industries, took a nosedive because of COVID. Here are the numbers. Comics in general went down 37% in sales, partially because comic sales are primarily through retailers in hard form. While there are web comics, and while you can buy a lot of the comics that be shown on your pads and phones, it's just not the same as having the comic book itself. And so most of the sales come in that form. If you don't have a retail store that's open, you can't buy the comics. Graphic novels went down 29% in sales in 2020. And then the other popular form of comics, which is, and I always say this wrong, manga, only went down 8%. Now I want you to think about that. Keep that 8% in mind, because manga comics are bought at all the same places that comic books are bought. Comic book shops and bookstores. That's where you're going to find them. So why did they manage to only go down 8% versus everybody else? And we're going to talk a little bit about that. Okay, let me bring up this one right here. Okay, there is a comic book, manga, called Demon Slayer. Demon Slayer is pretty popular, so popular in fact that it outsold. Let me just bring up the information here real quick here, because it's fascinating what they've done. Okay, so the question is, did Demon Slayer really outsell the entire comics industry? That's hyperbolic. It did not outsell the entire comics industry, but it did outsell DC and Marvel comic books combined. Okay, what was that number? Let's find it right here and here. 83 million units. Last year they sold 82.34. So in 2019 they sold 83 million, and it went down about a million, but outsold regular comics like from DC and Marvel. Now, why would that be the case? I mean, take a look at this guy. I've never understood the fascination with manga comics myself. The colors look like they were made with watercolors. There's usually a lot of sharp lines and corners in the drawing. The characters are generally Japanese or at least Asian based, but they always look white. I mean, does he look Japanese? I mean, they always have these big eyes, blonde hair. I mean, a lot of times blue eyes. I don't get it. But you know what? It doesn't matter that I don't get it, because a lot of people like this style. $82 million is a lot of money for one comic book. So what's happening? I would say perhaps what's happening is this. Manga style comics, not only do people like the artwork form, but the stories are focused on outsized adventures, action, escapism, and there are no damn politics or social commentary in the stories. I'm going to repeat that. The reason why manga may be outselling regular comics is because not only do people like the art form, but the stories are focused on outsized adventures, action, escapism, and no political or social commentary. There's a reason why people go to the movies, watch television, read novels, play video games, and read comic books. It's because we want to escape. It's an industry across all those properties predicated on people wanting to, for a little while, forget about their wife or husband, forget about the kids, forget about the job for damn sure, and not want to think about politics and the news. They want to go see something, read something that's fun and doesn't bring the real world into their mind all the time. As soon as you start tinkering around and putting in social justice messages or even political messages as a primary reason or primary story device in your comic book, novel, movie, or television show, it turns people off because it ruins the escapism. What does making Tim Drake bisexual do for DC Comics? Does it increase their sales? No. Because the people that are woke and SJWs aren't, number one, the people who buy comics. Listening to the Twitterverse, most of those people who are saying, yay, they're not buying comic books on a weekly basis. Of the people who are gay, who do like comic books, they were not pounding on the desk to make Tim Drake bisexual, gay. They weren't asking for Iceman to be turned gay. They weren't asking for Colossus to be turned gay. No one was ever asking that of those specific characters because they were established. I have no doubt that some people would like to see a comic book character that reflects whom they are. I think there are other people who are more writer-centric who say, look, there are gay people in the world. So the idea that you would have no superhero that's gay doesn't seem plausible, which is true. That doesn't mean they want an established character to be turned at. They mean, give me a new character that's awesome, but is also gay. Give me a new character that's awesome, that's also black. Give me a new character that's female, that's also awesome, looks like a female. There's a theme here. When you do that and you focus in on the characters themselves, good things happen. When you don't do that, well, bad things happen. Listen, a black Superman isn't going to make any damn money. Core fans are not going to see a black Clark Kent on principle. When Coates gets done with his bullshit story, even casual fans are going to hate it and trash it. Think about something. Zack Snyder is a white dude that knows how to put together a action sequence. I mean, his gift are action scenes. I mean, the 300, come on. Man of Steel, as we're about to talk about, a lot of the fighting scenes in that were incredible. Okay? He got to play in the whole DC sandbox. Usually that doesn't happen. Usually a director directs a specific character, and that's all that he has any contact with. But he got to play with Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman and Aquaman. I mean, they just gave him the whole toolbox. He found a perfect actor in Henry Cavill to play Superman. Okay? I mean, he was great as the character. Then he was able to bring two of the most popular superhero characters of all time together, fighting each other in Batman versus Superman. And both of those movies failed. Man of Steel only made $660 million. It should have made $1 billion. Batman versus Superman, come on. That's a movie that should have made $2 billion. Easy. They're the granddaddies and uncles of all other comic book characters. Iconic there are people in Africa who know who Superman and Batman are. And you brought them together in one movie, fighting each other? $2 billion. Easy. It only made $875 million. Now why? Why did both of these movies fail? And the answer is rather simple. Because Zack wrote the characters in such a way that didn't resemble the characters themselves. Superman was a cynical Kryptonian version of Batman, and Batman was running around trying to murder people, including Superman. That's not Batman. That's not Superman. Those are not the characters. And as a result, your core fans turned away. This is what they don't get. You have a core set of fans. You want them to continue buying your product. Your job as a marketer and as a company is to try and expand that core fan base. Get the people who don't buy often to buy more often. Get the people who don't buy at all to start buying. But if you pay attention to the people who don't buy at all, to the expense of the people who buy regularly, you fail because the people who are buying regularly stop buying. You know why Endgame makes $2 billion? You know why Black Panther makes more than $1 billion? Because core audience members go see it 3, 4, and 5 times. Everybody outside that core might see a movie once or twice. Outside of the core audience, they're not buying those comic books at all. I'm telling you, the pink-haired crazies on Twitter that they're appealing to are a small percentage of the market. The larger percentage of the market are people like me who don't want these characters changed and will punish the company for changing them. I have no interest in any comic book title with Robin in it, with him trying to date dudes. I have no interest in seeing a Black Tim Drake Robin in Titans. I don't want to see that. I want to see Cyborg in Titans. That would be cool. They killed off the original Aqualad in season 1, or they showed him dying, getting killed off, I should say, in season 1 of Titans. So bring in the Black Aqualad as a replacement. That makes sense. Sure, the character of a Black Aqualad done specifically for the cartoons and not originally in the comic books, as I recall, was a bit of a pander, but at least it was an original character with a backstory as to why he was now showing up. That's what you do. See, the reason this matters is because the business end is one that you cannot make money pissing off your core character, your core audience. You just can't do it. Now, why would I remain a member of HBO Max? Or if I'm curious enough to want to see it, why wouldn't I just pirate it? Seriously. Why would I do that? I have no intention of seeing the Matt Reeves Batman with a Black Commissioner Gordon. And when I say I have no plans to see it, I mean I have no plans to pay money to see it. I might get curious to see what he does, but I won't pay money for it, which means I'll either pirate it or I'll sneak in, one or the other. I'm not the only one that does that. And more people are going to do that and then trash it as it goes on. So the question becomes, if this happens this way, if this is the way it is, why then do companies do this? Why are they continuing to do this if it's not helping grow their bottom line? Well, there's a couple reasons. One reason is because they've got people in the room that are obstinate, meaning their values are more important than a bottom line, even though the decision making they're making is supposedly for the bottom line. That's number one. The other reason is this concept that called the 4-quadrant marketing. The four quadrant marketing at the beginning was an interesting, weird marketing concept. And this is why. Because you had white males under age 25 that you were trying to get. You were trying to get females younger than 25. And then you also wanted to appeal to males older than 25 and females older than 25. Now, that seems to me, everybody, right? Like, why are you trying to put a quadrant in? But of course, each quadrant, certain things are going to appeal to different things. So like, for instance, the younger males might want something in a movie that's a lot of action, a lot of fights, violence, whatever. Whereas the younger females might want more of a romance portion of the movie. So there's got to be a love interest. The females have to be dressed in some sort of fashion type thing. Older males, not sure exactly what they would be looking for, that the younger ones wouldn't, outside of, again, action. And females older than 25 wanted to be family friendly, perhaps. They want to see the women characters depicted in a strong, respectful manner. They don't want them ditzy. They don't want them sexed up, whatever the case may be. Now, of course, this gets a little bit more complicated because what they're also trying to appeal beyond this quadrant is black people, Spanish people, as well as gay people. And what they're saying is all the movies, all the television shows, all of the comic books, what they want to do is have something for everybody in it so that they can get everybody in it. It's like, to me, making chicken soup and then deciding to take every single, container of seasoning you have in your seasoning cabinet and putting it into soup. Isn't really going to turn out that well. Now, this quadrant type of marketing is something that Grace Randolph, who is a really popular YouTuber that talks about comics, movies, and things of that nature on a regular basis, talks about. Grace, I like. She's funny. I love her laugh. It's so infectious. But unfortunately, she tilts toward the liberal side and has never seen a gay situation or race bend that she didn't appreciate or like. And it's annoying because not everything can be a good idea, right? I mean, like, if something is a good idea, it doesn't mean it's a good idea all the time, right? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. And that's the way she approaches it. And it's incorrect because when you're, again, give me an example. Flash. In the TV show Flash, they made Iris West black instead of the white woman that she is in the comic books. They did that to appeal to people like me. Black males, black females, okay? If they had made Iris West white, would I have not watched the show? The answer is no. Of course I would have watched it. Anybody who wanted to watch Flash was going to watch Flash. Anybody who doesn't watch Flash because they're not in the comic books was not going to watch the TV show because they had a female character on there that was black. The only people who watch these shows are the people who weren't interested in it. The only people who are buying comic books and who care enough to make videos or rant on YouTube or Twitter about illogical changes to the character are core comic book fans. Everybody else is not buying them. And you can't make them buy it just because you make somebody gay, female, or black. That doesn't appeal to them because they don't like the medium to begin with. The reason people don't read comics is they don't like comics, or they age out of comics, or they're like me, saying nonsense in the stories that don't make any sense, and so we just walk away. Which brings us to the third reason why this keeps happening. The number of people who are in these offices making the case that I'm making is low. It's low because you have people leaving the industry. The latest writer for Batman has announced that he's leaving DC Comics to create his own book on Substack. In fact, let me bring that up for you here because it's a real interesting It's a real interesting story, really. Let me see. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So, oh, that's not the right one. Let me get the one about. There we go. So, the latest Batman writer, James Tynion, quits book and moved to Substack and creator-owned focus. Okay, and this is happening a lot. So this is, again, continuing the third reason why this is happening, because people aren't in the room to help them make these decisions and fight for these decisions. Okay? So, Tynion is known to DC Comics fans for his work on Batman. He's built up a stellar catalog of creator-owned comics as well. Something is Killing the Children has been a hit at Boom Comics, with a spin-off series and Netflix adaptation in the works. In a post on Substack, Tynion expressed a desire to create more of his content as a big reason for moving away from DC. I was trying to make one of the most difficult decisions of my professional life. DC had presented me with a 3-year renewal on Batman for the bulk of that time. I was grateful for the offer, but I couldn't help wonder if it was the right choice. And then I received another contract, the best I've ever been given in a decade as a professional comic book writer. A grant from Substack to create a new slate of original comic book properties directly on their platform that my co-creators and I would own completely, with Substack taking none of the intellectual property rights. Let me repeat that. With Substack taking none of the intellectual property rights. So he still owns them. And even the publishing rights. Meaning, if he wants to publish hard copies, he owns those publishing rights, not Substack. Given my bandwidth, I knew I could only pick one of 2 contracts sitting in front of me. Obviously, for somebody of his stature, it was a no-brainer to make that move. Not only is he going to make more money, but he owns his content. If you are a conservative-minded writer, or not even a conservative-minded writer, a writer that's just focused on the character and not gimmicks, why are you going to fight and go through all of this nonsense at DC when you can just leave and go do your own thing and make more money? And create the type of content and characters that people are dying to read but are no longer getting on a regular basis from DC or Marvel. That's why this keeps happening. People aren't in the room. People want to ignore the business case for not doing this. And they're lazy. They want a shortcut. And within the industry, particularly when it comes to comic book movies, DC, Warner Brothers Media, are the kings and queens of shortcuts. That's all. They don't want to build a universe. They don't want to integrate anything. They don't want to make original black characters. They don't want to uplift the original black characters that they already have. They want to solve the problem by just turning an actor, turning a role to an actress that's black, female, black male, or gay. And it does not work. Ever. DC, the biggest business case against this move that I can make is simple. They don't gain any additional sales by making Robin gay. They do stay flat or lose sales by making him gay. And that, at the end of the day, is all you really need to know from a marketing point of view. If your move on your product is not going to expand significantly, you just don't do it. If the character is stale, you don't change the staleness of the character by making them a female or making them black. You know what would have been, you know what, here's something free. All right? If you know somebody at DC and you come across this video and you've watched it to the end, send this idea to DC Comics and whatever. This is what they should do. They should just ignore that stupid comic that they just did, the next 3 or 4 comics they do it, just ignore it, pretend it didn't happen, like one of the 1,000 or so continuity errors that they make they've made over the years. This would have been a way to make the Robin character not stale. The apprentice tries to become the master. Do what is a core thing in Star Wars when, say, Obi-Wan tried to become a mentor to the guy who would eventually become Darth Vader, to Tim Drake. He finds a new character, fighting in the street or trying to do something, and he decides that this person should be trained to become a superhero. Batman disagrees, tells him not to do it, or tells him he won't do it, and then Tim Drake decides to start training him himself. Boom. There you go. That will freshen up the character real fast. And you could make that new character gay or bisexual or black and gay or whatever you want. Now you have an original character, you've pandered to your new group, but you haven't messed with the core character, and you've created a storyline that can affect not only the Robin character, but the Batman family of comics for the next 10, 15 years. And I came up with that in like 3 minutes. It's not that difficult, and it never has been. But when you start thinking outside of story and character, you create mountains that you didn't have to. That's going to be it for this particular edition of the Business Intercept. Again, I want to get you, please remind you to subscribe, hit the notification bell as well for this. That way you'll know when the next ones are coming. And until next time, have a good evening. I'll talk to you soon.